Hey guys, so I'm going to do kind of a quick demonstration here, quick being a relative term. This is something I probably should have done from the beginning, and I don't really know why it never occurred to me to do so. But what I wanted to do is compare some games in the Wii mode of the Wii U, run them side by side with the Dolphin emulator, to kind of get a direct comparison of the 480p versus the 1080p. And to make the comparison a little bit more fair, I've left the anti-aliasing turned off in Dolphin so that the games aren't getting any additional benefit from that. I think here I was checking to see if there was a system setting in the Wii mode, because it doesn't actually fill the screen, and it also doesn't fill the recording. So in editing, I've had to scale it up just slightly to get some of the proportions that Dolphin is displaying to get to an exact size comparison. It's minor, 2 to 4%, so it shouldn't make a huge difference. I'm going to go ahead in here and get started with some Metroid Prime. I've got this running directly on the Wii Trilogy, the disc version. I haven't decided if I'm going to get the eShop release, but to be honest, I'm more than likely going to. I decided to let the title sequence play out here, because one of the things that stood out to me is how clear it looks on the 1080p side. You know, even though the background video is 480p, the colors are more contrasty and the lines are cleaner. It could also be the Elgato box on the 480p side, maybe adding some additional gamma when capturing the video. One of the things that I noticed too, in particular with Metroid Prime, was that the image was so much darker on my TV than what actually got recorded. It was kind of hard to play with as dark as it was, and I had to pretty significantly increase the brightness to see stuff like doors. And once you shoot the doors, the glow that's around them goes away, and they were almost completely black after they were shot. And it's too dark, especially after having played through the sequence a few times now on Dolphin on my desktop monitor, which has a nice bright screen that's mainly intended for graphic design and photography work. Now on the 1080p side, you can see some pretty heavy frame rate fluctuation. So the two videos do get a bit desynced. I was able to get them realigned better once the shot changes and the frame rate jumps back up to 60 frames a second. So the rest of the sequence should line up fairly decently. I'm going to do some experimenting with locking the game to 30 frames per second just to see if it'll be more consistent, because I'd rather have a consistent 30 frames per second than something that may fluctuate wildly between 30 and 60 frames a second while I'm actually playing. You know, just to keep the gameplay actually smooth rather than kind of jumping around or pausing at times. And looking at the textures on the ship and on the frigate, it's kind of amazing to me to see how high resolution some of these textures actually are. And it's a bit jarring and a little disappointing that some of the textures on Samus's suit, you know, the various crevices and stuff, they're so low resolution in comparison. You know, the rest of her suit is well defined, and even her face behind the visor is clear and easily recognizable. Speaking of the visor here, one of the things that surprised me the first time I ran this in Dolphin was the visor and HUD overlay are actually all 3D models and not just bitmap images. I've played this game several times over the past 10 or 12 years or so, and I never would have thought that. I thought the easy route would have been just make them graphic overlays. Now those monitors there, you should really pause the video and go back and look at them side by side. That in particular is really amazing to me, the level of detail that you can see in them on the 1080p side. You know, even though it's the same texture and it's viewed from about the same distance, you can make out details on the 1080p side that you just can't see on the 480p side. The textures are muddy, they're indistinct, and honestly I wouldn't have faulted Retro for having used low resolution textures for something that you only barely glance in the game, and it's a game that's intended for 480 output anyways. But they didn't. They used textures that would be more suited for a game running in 1080p. And that's something that's, you know, it's always impressed me about Nintendo and their first party titles. They really go the extra mile to do nice texture work and fine details that, you know, even if those finer details are never really going to be appreciated or even seen possibly in the final shipping game. And that'll do it for Metroid Prime. I'm gonna go get out of here and put in some Twilight Princess. This is another game actually that really surprised me, seeing the detail and textures. You know, it was originally developed for the GameCube, but they delayed the release so that it could be done as a launch title for the Wii. And so by the time the game came out, it was already kind of showing its age. You know, I mean, it was, you know, again, developed for a system that was already 5 to 6 years old at the time. But when you see it on the 1080p side, the textures are a good bit higher resolution than what you would expect for a 480p game. You know, you can of course see the tiles and the grass as it pans out here, but the rocks and the stones and even Link's clothing, you can see more details on the 1080p side, even those, you know, the fence posts. And this shot here was one that really kind of drives it home. And look at the water on both sides, and on the 480p side, it's muddy, it's indistinct, and you know, this may be an intentional design decision, kind of blurring the background some. But you know, the problem is when your character or the other objects, they get further from the screen, whether the camera's panning out or if it's a fixed camera and you're walking away from the screen, they just start to get lost in the background, as it's basically just the aliasing of the objects in 480p start to take over, start to undefine the shapes. And you know, it's something you'll notice a bit later on when we get into Orden Village especially. You know, of course, on the 1080p side, these distant objects, they stay much cleaner and more distinct. wanted to show this sequence a bit because I think it really highlights the foliage. If you look at the 1080p side, it's, you know, everything is crisp and it's distinct, and you know, the textures that they use, they're low resolution, but you can still tell things apart. When you get over to the 480p side, everything just kind of blobs together. It's more well defined on the 1080p side. And then of course the faces really surprised me how clean they look. I've always assumed that the eyes in particular were just a texture decal, but in the 1080p side you can see some dimension to them. It gets lost in the 480p. And even the textures used for the eyes, like the iris, they're fairly clean and distinct in 1080p. And I'd say the only real texture disappointment I've seen so far has been in the hair. You know, I know they couldn't do individual strands or going crazy high resolution on textures to simulate individual strands as overkill, but it's still a bit odd seeing just how low resolution they actually are. And again, you can see kind of the impact that 1080p has on this shot. You know, running under the trees, you can make out individual branches and leaves and the grasses on the sides, the rocks in the wall. But on the 480p side, it's all of that stuff just kind of runs together. And I hate to keep harping on it, but it's just one of those things. Once you've seen it, you never really unsee it. Okay, now we get to Orden Village, and you can see as the shot, it's a wide shot and it's zoomed out, but you can clearly see Link and Epona on the 1080p side. But once that camera starts moving and they cross over into the 480p side, they almost get lost in that blurriness. I think that's going to be it for Twilight Princess. I'm definitely looking forward to playing this one again, though, on Dolphin. I used to think that the game looked gorgeous when it first came out, but as the years went on, my opinion kind of changed. I mean, I still like the story, and I'd still play the game despite the graphics, but it was one of those things that were hard to ignore. You know, now seeing it in 1080p and how much better it looks, I'm pretty excited about going back through it all. And I might even look to see if there are some HD texture packs, since Dolphin has the ability to use some custom textures in the games, and that may kind of breathe some new life into it for me. Alright, now on to some Skyward Sword. And you know, if any of these games could be said to have benefited the least from 1080p, it'd be Skyward Sword. And the game, even at the 480p, it's gorgeous. And I certainly attribute most of that to the texture work. You know, the game it's full of relatively high resolution textures, so you know, so much so that the disc size is basically about 4 times larger than Twilight Princess. And you know, I also attribute some of that to the art style as well. It's kind of a painterly look. It's almost like a watercolor or oil painting. And like the cell shading they used in Wind Waker, it really helps the game age gracefully. In this style, you know, the things in the background, they kind of blur and blend together like you'd see in a painting, and the models, they benefit from being more detailed. There's higher polygon counts overall versus what we got in Twilight Princess, so the the actual transition to 1080p really just kind of brings out all these little details more than just being like a, this is so much better than 480p. It's more of a, I don't know, it's just an enhancement of the style. And and since it came out so late in the Wii's life, it's, it almost seems like they might have been intending to someday re-release this on the Wii U. Kind of similar to what they did for Wind Waker, except, most of the work now has already been done. It's already in widescreen. The textures are already fairly high resolution. The models are already nicely detailed. It would almost just be a matter of recompiling it for Wii U and calling it a day. Maybe even do, I don't know, like an anthology release with HD remasters of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword all on, 1 or 2 discs. Damn. Thinking about it now, Ocarina and Majora, they've already gotten retextures and model updates for the 3DS releases. I wouldn't call them HD, but certainly higher resolution than their original N64 release. And, if they started with higher resolution assets when they were working on the 3DS versions, they pretty much just need to swap out the lower resolution 3DS textures for the higher resolution masters, and then port the executable to Wii U. So now I'm kind of in full-on speculation mode, but the more I think about it, the more I can see it making sense to maybe do a remastered anthology of all the 3D Zeldas. With Wind Waker already having been done, of course, but maybe do something special for the 30th anniversary. For my non-Zelda obsessed viewers, that's next year, or 2016, depending on when you're actually watching this. They could ride the hype from this year's Zelda release and be able to put something out for the anniversary that at this point wouldn't really require too terribly much work to do. The only game that really needs the most help is Twilight Princess. And while I don't mind the Wii remote controls for either Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword, it would be nice to have the option to have more traditional gamepad controls. I don't know, it seems a terrible waste to let the 30th anniversary come and go without a release to celebrate it. But, I don't know. Let's park the speculation train for now. I love some of these shots where part of the character or the scenery is on both the 1080p side and 480p side. Because it doesn't really show how much nicer and cleaner it looks on the 1080p, but rather how 1080p just enhances an already beautiful game. There are times though that the 480p does rear its ugly head, especially distant objects and characters again. And this, to me, is the one area where the game really benefits from 1080p, because no matter how far the camera pulls back, you can always distinctly tell where you are. And murder attempt number 1. Who would have thought Zelda was such a sociopath, right? I found this kind of interesting. That gasp that you clearly hear is a good second before Zelda actually makes a move. And when I was doing my first test with Dolphin, before I actually started recording anything, I hit that part and I just assumed it was due to maybe frame skipping or a script delay or something due to the emulation. But now when doing this comparison, since I had to play through on the Wii U, the exact same thing happened. So it's obviously hard-coded into the game. And it kind of makes me wonder if that was intentional or if that was maybe something that got past QA testing somehow. I'm guessing the gasp and animation are supposed to be synced up. I also found it interesting that some of the animations are timed a bit different. I've noticed things like eyes blinking at different times when looking at the Dolphin side versus the Wii side. You know, and here with Link's bird, you can see the animation is frame for frame, but the bird is moving at different times on each side. And you'll see it again a bit later with Fi and inside the goddess statue with the Hyrulean crest. And I kind of wonder if there's some randomness in the animations, because you also notice some differences in the skybox texture. The positions of the clouds are different at times, and occasionally you'll see kind of a free-floating cloud that is on the Dolphin side, but when it crosses that threshold in the center, it's not there on the Wii side. But when the camera kind of pans down a bit, there's the cloud on the Wii side. I added this because I just liked this shot. I like when the birds come around and they're just lined up perfectly with the center of the screen. And these are some of those the finer details that I was talking about earlier, like the harp strings actually vibrating in what looks like the correct finger pluck. So someone actually went in and animated all of those by hand. There's, it's not scripted, it's not motion capped animations. And the feathers on the wings of the birds, they're not simply a flat textured plane or some sort of simple geometry. They're individually modeled, and they move independently of each other. And for simpler graphics, they don't really have to go the extra step, but they did it anyways. And it's more of that Nintendo quality. Love them or hate them, they make a good game. Ah, yeah. Attempted murder number 2. And Link's just like, whatever, man. I'm the hero of time. Legends have been written about me. This scene when you first encounter Fee in the statue, I love that she's dead center on the screen. You'll notice everyone else is generally more to one side or the other, but that first shot of her being dead center was just a real nice touch. Kind of, bisects the gem on her forehead and down to the dual colors on her cloak or cape or wings or whatever that is. There's just something about the symmetry of it that grabs my attention. And there's an argument to be made for Zelda games finally getting some voice acting, but I also think there's an equally valid argument to be made for not doing so. And personally, I think I kind of fall on the side of not having the voice acting, but I think it's more just because I don't want to chance it being bad voice acting. There are some really incredible examples. Something like in The Last of Us or BioShock Infinite were so well done that you almost forget you're playing a game. But then I look at something like Other M, which I actually liked the game, and I know that's not exactly the popular opinion on it, but my god, the voice acting was dreadful. Actually, I think what surprised me the most about that was finding out that not only was the monumentally talented Jennifer Hale the voice, grunts mostly, of Samus in the Prime games, but that she wasn't chosen to voice Samus in Other M. Or maybe she declined after reading the script. I don't know. I don't want to bag on the game because it's a good game. It just had a terrible script, and the voice actors did it no favors. Yeah, that's the kind of thing, though, that worries me when so many people call for finally getting Zelda games fully voiced. That it could be another Other M. Except that this time you have to deal with it for like 4 times as long, just by the nature of a Zelda game being much longer than a Metroid game. I guess if they were, maybe to come out with an announcement, something like Troy Baker is the voice of Adult Link, or maybe Jeremy Shada as Child Link, and Jennifer Hale as Zelda, and Laura Bailey as Impa, and Ashley Johnson as Link's childhood friend and or sister Saria, or Errol, or Ilya, or whomever her name would be in the new game. And of course, then having somebody maybe like Nolan North or David Hayter as Ganondorf. I could probably get on board with that. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for this video. I just wanted to kind of give a quickish demonstration, and I actually cut a lot out, even to get it to the 35 or so minutes that it currently is. I actually played through all 3 games from a new file to the point where I exit out of them twice, which was roughly about 3 hours or so of just recording, and then on to editing that. And I never want any of my Let's Plays or demo videos to need that much editing again, because if I had to put a number to it, I'd say it's probably been another at least 6 hours on top of the recording, because after the initial cut, the video itself was just over an hour and a half. So I had to start making deeper cuts, and then things would get shifted out of sync, so I had to go in frame by frame and realign them when possible. It's been pretty insane. And then, of course, writing the script, which is something that I never do. Not that you can tell, because I'm always so concise and know exactly what it is I want to say. Yeah. So, suffice to say, I am going to be so glad when this is done, and I can get back to actually playing some games. I miss that. But that all said, I'm really impressed with Dolphin, and especially with how it brings out so many details in these games. Some of them I've been playing for more than 10 years. Little details that I would have never noticed before. But in just how well it actually runs these games. I'm so much that I really do feel like playing them again. I'm a big fan of emulation, and it's just like I'm a big fan of ebooks and digital music. I've got the original discs and the cartridges and the books and the tapes and the vinyls and all that stuff. But whenever I can consolidate something, I'm all over it. I can store the originals in a safe place, knowing that I won't inadvertently damage them or wear them out from using them. And I can take the digital versions with me on vacation, or when I need to move, it's a lot less stuff to move, or just, take them out to the park for a lazy afternoon. I know emulation in particular exists in kind of a gray area, legally speaking, due to how easy it is to just go and download entire libraries of games for the various consoles. My personal stance is that if I have the original game, I'm legally allowed to make a copy. So it's all good. But I will end here, because otherwise I'll keep rambling. So, thank you for watching. And if you dig this kind of stuff, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out my other videos if you haven't already. And, yeah, thanks again. And I'll see you next time.